Welcome. In this video, I'm reading from chapter 1, Merchant of Venice by William Shakespeare. This is the syllabus as prescribed by Mumbai University for first year BA LLB students. In this video, I'll be covering Act 4, Scene 1. We'll go through the summary of what has happened before we read this chapter. Also, I'll be explaining each line because the English is very old type. So many of these words I'll be explaining in translating it in normal day-to-day English language that we use now. Where required, I'll explain, otherwise I'll use the old English itself and move forward. But before that, let's go through the summary of what has happened up till now, which leads to the Act 4, Scene 1 of the Merchant of Venice. Okay, let's go through the background. Bassanio's desire to woo Portia. Bassanio, a young Venetian, wants to court the wealthy heiress Portia but lacks the funds to do so. He turns to his close friend Antonio, a merchant of Venice, for financial help. Bassanio wants to marry Portia. She is a heiress who she's quite wealthy, and he wants to marry her. But because he does not have money, he asks his friend Antonio for financial help. Antonio's wealth is tied up in his merchant ships, which are currently at sea. Despite having no liquid cash, Antonio agrees to help Bassanio and suggests borrowing money on credit in his name. Okay, where I feel need to explain, I'll do it, otherwise I'll move forward. They approach Shylock, a Jewish moneylender. Shylock harbors deep resentment means hatred, towards Antonio, who has publicly insulted him, spat on him, and undermined his money lending business by lending money without interest. Despite this, Shylock agrees to lend 3,000 ducats for 3 months, but on one condition. If Antonio fails to repay the loan on time, Shylock will be entitled to a pound of Antonio's flesh. And confident that his ships will return with enough profit to repay the loan, Antonio agrees to Shylock's harsh terms, despite Bassanio's protests. The bond is sealed, and Bassanio uses the loan to travel to Belmont to woo Portia. In Belmont, Portia's suitors must choose between 3 caskets, gold, silver and lead, as part of her late father's test. The correct choice will win her hand in marriage. Bassanio arrives, and with Portia's encouragement, he chooses the lead casket, winning her love and the right to marry her. Alongside Bassanio and Portia's romance, Gresciano, Bassanio's friend, falls in love with Portia's maid, Nerissa. The two couples plan to marry together. Back in Venice, Antonio learns that his merchant ships have been lost at sea, leaving him unable to repay the loan on time. Meanwhile, Shylock becomes enraged when his daughter Jessica elopes with Lorenzo, a Christian, and steals a significant amount of his wealth. Humiliated and grieving, Shylock channels his anger toward Antonio, determined to enforce the bond and take his pound of flesh. Antonio sends a letter to Bassanio, informing him of his dire situation. Heartbroken, Bassanio immediately leaves Belmont to return to Venice and help his friend. Portia and Nerissa secretly decide to follow them, disguised as men, to intervene. This sets the stage for Act 4, Scene 1, the climactic courtroom scene where Antonio's fate is decided and Portia, disguised as the lawyer Balthazar, takes center stage. The theme of mercy, justice, and revenge come to the forefront as the characters face the consequences of their action. So let's start the chapter. So before we start the chapter, let's revise the characters. First is Antonio, his friend Bassanio. These are the main characters. Then we have Portia and Nerissa. Portia is the heiress and she's quite rich and wealthy. And her servant or her friend is Nerissa. She's the helper. She's the maid. And Bassanio wins the test and marries is going to marry Portia. But by that time, and also Bassanio wanted loan, so he approached his friend Antonio. But because Antonio being a merchant, his ships were in the sea, and because he thought that he would be able to repay Shylock from a moneylender, Jewish moneylender from whom he borrowed the money for Bassanio. He thought that he would be able to easily pay off the loan when he gets profit from his ship that has sailed, and but he comes to know that his ships are lost in the sea and he won't be able to repay Shylock on time. And Shylock, being a moneylender, is not very much liked by Antonio and his friends. And it is said that they used to insult him and also not looked upon in a favorable way because he was Jewish in that sense, and Antonio and his friends were Christians. So there was this issue also. Other than that, and Shylock put a clause, a condition that if Antonio is not able to repay, then Shylock will be entitled to a pound of flesh of his body. And later on, Shylock's daughter, Shylock's daughter Jessica, she runs away or elopes with Lorenzo, a Christian, and she also takes a lot of money from Shylock, steals a lot of money from Shylock, and runs away, elopes with Lorenzo. This angers him so much that he thinks about taking revenge, and his channels his anger towards Antonio. Now let's continue. The Duke is the judge in that at that time. What is Antonio here? Which means the brackets, the words in brackets are the translation of that. The Duke asks if Antonio is present. Ready, so please your grace, says Antonio. I am here and ready, if it pleases you, your grace. Where required, I'll read the translation. Otherwise, I'll skip it if I already understand what it means, or if it's easy to understand the actual English. I'm sorry for thee. I am sorry for you. Thou art come to answer. You have come to face a cruel enemy, a heartless man, unable to feel pity, completely lacking from any dram of mercy. This is what the Duke says. Thou art come to answer a stony adversary, an inhuman wretch, incapable of pity, void and empty from any dram of mercy. Dram means smallest. Antonio says, I have heard your grace hath that great pains to qualify his rigorous course, but since he stands obdurate, and that no lawful means can carry me out of his envy's reach, I do oppose my patience to his fury and am armed. Let's read the translation. I have heard that your grace has worked hard to soften his harsh demands, but since he remains stubborn and unyielding, and no legal way can save me from his hatred and malice, I will meet his rage with my patience and am prepared to suffer with a quietness of spirit the very tyranny and rage of his. And then he continues, that is, Antonio continues, to endure calmly and with dignity his extreme cruelty and anger. Duke says, Go, one, and call the Jew in the court. Someone go and call Shylock into the courtroom. Salario, he is ready at the door. He comes, my lord. He is waiting at the door and is coming, my lord. Enters Shylock. Duke says, Make room and let him stand before our face. Make space and let him stand before us. Shylock, the world thinks, and I think so too, that though but leads this fashion of thy malice to the last hour of act, and then its thought, though it show thy mercy and remorse more strange, then is thy strange apparent cruelty, and where thou now exacts the penalty, which is a pound of this poor merchant's flesh, thou wilt not only lose the forfeiture, but touched with human gentleness and love, forgive, O mighty of the principal, glancing an eye of pity on his losses that have of late so huddled on his back, and now to press a royal merchant down and pluck commiseration of his state from brassy bosoms and rough hearts of flint, from stubborn Turks and Tartars never trained to offices of tender courtesy. Now let's read the translation of this. Shylock will read the translation in the brackets. Shylock, everyone believes, and I agree, to the last hour of act, and then it's thought that you are only pretending to be this malicious until the last possible moment, and then it is believed you will show unexpected mercy and regret, even stranger than your obvious cruelty now. And while you now demand the penalty, which is a pound of this poor merchant's flesh, you will not only give up the punishment, but moved by human kindness and compassion, forgive a portion of the debt, looking with pity at the losses that have recently burdened him so heavily, enough to weigh down even a great merchant, and inspire sympathy for his condition, even from cold and unfeeling people, from hard-hearted people like Turks and Tartars who are not taught to act of kindness and courtesy. So basically, the Duke, the judge, is trying to tell Shylock to be merciful because Antonio has already suffered quite a loss in his business, and also he requests that Shylock reduce the penalty or the interest because he won't be able to pay, and to show kindness and compassion. We all expect a gentle answer, Jew. He continues, that is, the Duke continues, we are all hoping for a merciful response from you, Shylock. Shylock says, I have possessed your grace of what I purpose, and by our holy Sabbath have I sworn to have the due and forfeit of my bond. If you deny it, let the danger light upon your character and your city's freedom. You will ask me why I rather choose to have a weight of carry-on flesh than to receive 3,000 ducats. I will not answer that. but say it is my humour. Is it answered? What if my house be troubled with a rat, and I be pleased to give 10,000 ducats to have it banned? What? Are you answered yet? Some men there are love not a gaping pig, some that are mad if they behold a cat, and others when the bagpipe sings it the nose, cannot contain their urine for affection. Masters often passion sways it to the mood of what it likes or loathes. Now for your answer, as there is no firm reason to be rendered why he cannot abide a gaping pig, why he, a harmless necessary cat, why he, a woolen bagpipe but of force, must yield to such inevitable shame as to offend himself being offended. So can I give no reason, nor I will not, more than a lodged hate and a certain loathing. I bear Antonio that I follow thus, a losing suit against him. Are you answered? Shylock says, I have already informed your grace of my intentions, and I have sworn by our sacred Sabbath to claim the penalty stated in my contract. If you deny me this, if you deny me this, let the blame fall on your laws and the freedom of your city. You may ask why I would rather have a piece of worthless flesh instead of accepting 3,000 ducats. I won't explain, but I will say it's my preference. Does that answer you? What if my house is infested with a rat and I choose to spend 10,000 ducats to have it killed? Is that enough of an answer for you? So, this is quite interesting. The Duke is telling Shylock to show mercy and to reduce the interest or forego the interest part of the loan taken. And Duke is asking Shylock as to why he wants to give an answer. Uh, Duke is asking Shylock to give an answer for this reason for the taking off a pound of flesh of Antonio. And Shylock says that he has taken vow on the holy Sabbath, and therefore he will take the bond. He will enforce the contract. And he says that if he is denied that, then he is saying that the laws and the city is it is shameful that the laws are not being implemented. And then he says, why you ask me that I want a worthless flesh, that is, why do I want a skin instead of 3,000 ducats? And he says that first he says I'll not answer, but then he says, very interestingly, he says, let's assume that I have a rat in my house and I want to spend 10,000 ducats to remove my house infested with a rat. So I'll spend my money that I'll receive from Antonio on removing rats from my house. Rat here he means Antonio. And I be pleased to give 10,000 ducats. And I choose to spend 10,000 ducats to have it killed. Is that enough of an answer for you? Then he's equating the rat with Antonio. He says that I will spend 10,000 ducats just to kill Antonio. Some men dislike the sight of a roasted pig. Some are driven mad at the sight of a cat, and others cannot stand the sound of bagpipes, cannot control themselves because emotions often overpower logic and guide it toward what one likes or hates. Very beautifully answered. Now, here is my answer. Just as there is no solid reason given why someone cannot tolerate a roasted pig, why someone dislikes a harmless and necessary cat, or why someone hates the sound of a bagpipe, except that they must accept the embarrassment of being offended. So can I give no reason, nor I will not. So that they are offended by such things. In the same way, I can give no reason, nor will I, except for my deep seated hatred and disgust I have for Antonio, which is why I pursue this case against him, even at a loss. Does that answer you? Bassanio says, this is no answer, though unfeeling man, to excuse the current of thy cruelty. Bassanio says, this is not an answer, you cold hearted man, to justify the extent of your cruelty. Shylock says, I am not bound to please thee with my answers. Bassanio says, do all men kill the thing they do not love? Shylock, hates any man the thing he would not kill? Does anyone hate something but still refuse to kill it? Bassanio, every offense is not a hate at first. Shylock, what? Wouldst thou have a serpent sting thee twice? What? Would you let a snake bite you twice? Antonio to Bassanio, I pray you, think you question with the Jew. You may as well go stand upon the beach, and bid the main flood bait his usual height. You may as well use question with the wolf, why he hath made the eve bleat for the lamb. You may as well forbid the mountain pines to wag their high tops and to make no noise. When they are threatened with the gusts of heaven, you may as well do anything most hatred, as seek to soften that then which what's harder, his Jewish heart. Therefore, I do beseech you, make no more offers, use no further means, but with all brief and plain convenience, let me have judgment, and the Jew his will. Now let's go through the translation. I beg you, don't bother arguing with the Jew. You might as well stand on the shore and ask the tide to stop rising and lower its levels. You might as well ask a wolf why it made a mother ship cry for her lamb. You might as well command tall pine trees not to sway their tops or make noise when the winds blow strongly against them. You might as well attempt the most impossible thing as try to soften something harder than any of these his unyielding heart. So I beg you, stop making offers and trying to persuade him, and simply and quickly let the court deliver its judgment, and let Shylock have what he wants. Bassanio says, for thy 3,000 ducats, here is 6. Here is 6,000 ducats instead of 3,000. Shylock, if every ducat in 6,000 ducats were in 6 parts, and every part a ducat, I would not draw them, I would have my bond. Shylock says, if every ducat in the 6,000 ducats were divided into 6 parts, each part worth 1 ducat, I still would not take it. I want my contract fulfilled. Here it shows the anger that is Shylock is troubled with, and he is not even willing to take double of what Antonio owes him. Duke, how shalt thou hope for mercy, rendering none? How can you expect mercy when you give none? Shylock, what judgment shall I dread, doing no wrong? You have among you many a purchased slave, which, like your asses and your dogs and mules, you use in abject and in slavish paths, because you bought them. Shall I say to you, let them be free, marry them to your heirs? Why sweat they under burdens? Let their beds be made as soft as yours, and let their palates be seasoned with such wines. You will answer, the slaves are ours. So do I answer you. The pound of flesh which I demand of him is dearly bought. It's mine, and I will have it. If you deny me, fie upon your law. There is no force in the decrees of Venice. I stand for judgment. Answer, shall I have it? Shylock says, why should I fear any judgment if I have done nothing wrong? Your Venetians own many slaves you have bought, whom you treat like donkeys, dogs, and mules, for degrading and servile tasks, because you own them. Should I tell you? Set them free. Let them marry your children. Why should they toil under heavy burdens, make their beds as comfortable as yours, and feed them with the same fine food as you eat? You would reply, the slaves belong to us, and so I give you the same reply. The pound of flesh I demand from Antonio was paid for. It is mine, and I will take it. If you deny me this, shame on your law. It would mean the laws of Venice are worthless. I demand a ruling. Will I get what I am owed? Very beautifully stated by Shylock in an analogy, an example of countering Bassanio and the Duke. Duke says, upon my power, I may dismiss this court, unless Bellerio, a learned doctor whom I have sent for to determine this, come here today. Duke says, if it were up to me, I would end this trial, unless Valerio, a wise legal scholar whom I have summoned to give a ruling, arrives here today. Salario, my lord here stays without, a messenger with letters from the doctor, new come from Padua. Translation, my lord, there is someone waiting outside, a messenger with letters from the scholar, who has just arrived from Padua. Duke, bring us the letters. Call the messenger. Translation, bring me the letters and call the messenger in. Bassanio, good cheer, Antonio. What? Man, courage yet. The Jew shall have my flesh, blood, bones, and all, ere thou shalt lose for me one drop of blood. Bassanio says, stay hopeful, Antonio. Come on, man, have courage. I will give Shylock my own flesh, blood, and bones before I let you lose even a drop of blood for my sake. Antonio says, I am a tainted wether of the flock, meetest for death, the weakest kind of fruit, drops earliest to the ground, and so let me. You cannot better be employed, Bassanio, than to live still and write mine epitaph. Antonio says, I am like a sick sheep in the flock, the one most fit to die, the weakest fruit, falls to the ground first, and I should be the same. There is nothing better you can do, Bassanio, than to live on and write my tombstone. Tombstone. Enter Nerissa disguised as a lawyer's clerk. Nerissa enters dressed as a clerk. Duke. Came you from Padua, from Bellario? Did you come from Padua, from Bellario? Nerissa, as clerk says, from both, my lord. Bellario greets your grace. Yes, my lord, from both. Bellario sends his greetings to you, handing him a paper which he reads aside while Shylock sharpens his knife on the sole of his shoes. Bassanio. Why dost thou whet thy knife so earnestly? Why are you sharpening your knife so eagerly? Shylock says, to cut the forfeiture from that bankrupt there. To cut the penalty, the pound of flesh from that bankrupt man over there. Gratiano. Not on thy soul, but on thy soul, harsh Jew. You are not sharpening it on the sole of your shoe, but on your very soul, cruel Jew. Though mask that thy knife keen, you are making your knife sharp. But no metal can, no, not the hangman's axe, bear half the keenness of thy sharp envy. Can no prayers pierce thee? but no blade can. You're making your knife sharp, but no blade can, not even the executioner's axe, match the sharpness of your deep hatred. Can't any prayers of soften your heart? Shylock. No, none that thou hast wit enough to make. No, none that you are smart enough to say. Gratiano. Oh, be thou damned, inexorable dog, for and for thy life let justice be accused, thou almost makest me waver in my faith, to hold opinion with Pythagoras, that souls of animals infuse themselves into the trunks of man. Thy currish spirit governed a wolf who hanged for human slaughter. Even from the gallows did he fell soul fleet. And while thou layest in thy unhallowed dam, infused itself in thee for thy desires, are wolfish, bloody, starved, and ravenous. Let's go through the translation. Gratiano says, "Oh, be damned, you accursed dog! Let justice itself be condemned for allowing your existence. You make me almost doubt my faith, to agree with Pythagoras' belief that the souls of animals enter the bodies of men. Your dog like spirit once belonged to a wolf which was hanged for killing people, and from the gallows its evil soul escaped. And while you were in your sinful mother's womb, it entered you, because your desires are like a wolf's, bloodthirsty, greedy, and savage." It's quite strange that people are able to speak in the open court in front of the Duke, and they are even allowed to do that by the Duke in the first place. Shylock. Till thou canst rail the seal from of my bond, thou but offends thy lungs to speak so loud. Repair thy wit, good youth, or it will fall to curseless ruin. I stand here for law. Shylock says, "Until you can shout loud enough to erase the seal on my contract, you are only wasting your breath by shouting. Fix your reasoning, young man, or it will collapse. Beyond repair, I am here to demand the law." Shylock is arguing very methodically. He is stating that you can shout as much as you want, but the contract will still stand. And by shouting, you're just wasting your breath. Then he tells him, this is a lesson for us as advocates also, that to fix our reasoning, without proper reasoning, we we cannot win. An advocate cannot win. Reasoning has to be valid. That is what we learn in elementary logic also. The whole argument will collapse if the reasoning is not correct, is not valid. And he is there to demand the law, but then along with law there is mercy also that needs to be taken care of. Duke, this letter from Valerio doth commend a young and learned doctor to our court. Where is he? Duke says, "This letter from Valerio praises a young and wise legal scholar to join our court. Where is he?" Narissa, as clerk, "He attendeth here hard by, to know your answer whether you will admit him. He is waiting nearby, to hear whether you will allow him to join." Duke, "With all my heart. Some 3 or 4 of you. Go give him courteous conduct to this place. Gladly, a few of you. Go and escort him politely here. Attendants exit. Meantime the court shall hear Bellario's letter." The Duke reads Bellario's letter aloud. Bellario's letter, read by the Duke. "Your Grace shall understand that at the receipt of your letter I am very sick, but in the instant that your messenger came, in loving visitation was with me a young doctor of Rome. His name is Balthazar. I acquainted him with the cause in controversy, between the Jew and Antonio the merchant. We turned over many books together. He is furnished with my opinion, which, bettered with his own learning, comes with him at my importunity to fill up your grace's request in my stead. I beseech you, let him lack of years be no impediment, to let him lack a reverent estimation, for I never knew so young a body with so old a head. I leave him to your gracious acceptance, whose trial shall better publish his commendation. I am not reading the translation. If you want, you can pause and read the translation. Duke, you hear the learned Bellarius what he writes. Duke, and here I take it is the doctor come. Give me your hand. Come, you from old Bellario. Portia as Balthazar. I did, my lord. Duke, you are welcome. Take your place. Are you acquainted with the difference that holds this present question in the court? Duke says, are you familiar with the dispute that is being debated in this court? Portia as Balthazar. I am informed thoroughly of the cause, which is the merchant here and which is the Jew. Duke. Antonio and old Shylock both stand forth. Stand forth means step forward. Portia as Balthazar. Is your name Shylock? Shylock. Shylock is my name. Portia. Of a strange nature is the suit you follow, yet in such rule that the Venetian law cannot impugn you as you do proceed. You stand within his danger, do you not? Now henceforward, I'll not say Portia, I'll say Balthazar. Translation is, your case is strange, but it is still within the rules of Venetian law, and it cannot challenge you for proceeding. Antonio, you are at risk from him, correct? Antonio says, A. So he says. Portia. Balthazar, do you confess the bond? Do you admit the contract? Portia. Then must the Jew be merciful? Shylock. On what compulsion must I? Tell me that. Balthazar. The quality of mercy is not strained. It dropped as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. It's mightiest in the mightiest. It becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. His scepter shows the force of temporal power, the attribute to awe and majesty, wherein doth sit the dread and fear of kings. But mercy is above this sceptred sway. It is enthroned in the hearts of kings. It is an attribute to God himself, and earthly powers doth then show like gods, when mercy seasons justice. Therefore, Jew, though justice be thy plea, consider this, that in the course of justice none of us should see salvation. We do pray for mercy, and that same prayer doth teach us all to render the deeds of mercy. I have spoken thus much to mitigate justice of thy plea, which if thou follow this strict court of Venice, must needs give sentence against the merchant there. Let's translate. Balthazar says, mercy is not something forced. It falls like gentle rain from the sky on the earth below. It blesses both people involved. It blesses the one who shows mercy and the one who receives it. It is most powerful when shown by those in power. It suits a king better than his crown does. A king's scepter symbolizes his earthly authority. Scepter is the stick, which brings fear and respect, and establishes the fear and power of the rulers. But mercy is higher than this earthly authority. It lives in the hearts of rulers. It is a quality of God Himself, and earthly power becomes most like God's when justice is tempered with mercy. So, Shylock, though you demand justice, think about this. If justice alone were served, none of us would deserve salvation. We pray for mercy ourselves, and that prayer teaches us to also show mercy to others. I have said all this to soften the harshness of your demand, but if you insist on strict justice, this court of Venice will have to rule against Antonio. Shylock, my deeds upon my head, I crave the law, the penalty and forfeit of my bond. My actions are my responsibility. I demand the law, the penalty and payment specified in my contract. Balthazar, is he not able to discharge the money? Can't Antonio pay the money owed? This passage reveals the tension between strict adherence to the law, which is Shylock's perspective, and the higher moral principle of mercy, which is Portia's argument. Portia's eloquent speech on the quality of mercy is a key moment in The Merchant of Venice, appealing to universal values of compassion and divine justice. However, Shylock refuses to be moved, insisting on the letter of the law. Bassanio's plea. Bassanio says, yes, here I tender it for him in the court. Yea, twice the sum. If that will not suffice, I'll be bound to pay it 10 times over, on the forfeit of my hands, my head, my heart. If this will not suffice, it must appear that malice bears down truth. Bassanio says, yes, I offer the money for Antonio here in court. I will even pay double if that's not enough. I'll promise to pay it 10 times over. And if I can't, you can take my hands, head, and heart as payment. If this doesn't satisfy you, it's clear that cruelty is defeating fairness. To the Duke, and I beseech you, I beg you, Duke, wrest once the law to your authority. Twist the law just this once for justice. To do a great thing, do a little wrong, and curb this cruel devil of his will. To do something greatly right, allow a small wrong, and stop this cruel devil from getting his way. Balthazar, it must not be. There is no power in Venice can alter a decree established. It will be recorded for a precedent, and many an error by the same example will rush into the state. It cannot be. Portia says, as Balthazar, she says, that can't happen. No one in Venice has the power to change an already established law. If it happens, it will set a precedent, and future mistakes will follow because of it. This cannot be allowed. Now, here, a very important point has been stated for us as to be future advocates, lawyers, that precedent laws cannot be twisted, laws cannot be broken. Laws are established and they have to be implemented in letter and in spirit. Because if the person who is judging, the judge, twists the law, then it will set a precedent which will be used by others to exploit and misuse law. Therefore, Portia says that this cannot happen. Shylock, a Daniel came to judgment, yea, a Daniel. O wise young judge, how I do honor thee. Shylock says, a wise judge like Daniel from the Bible, truly wise. Oh, brilliant young judge, I respect you so much. Balthazar, I pray you let me look upon the bond. Please let me see the contract. Shylock, here it is, most reverend doctor, here it is. Here it is, honorable judge. Hands over the paper. Portia says, Shylock, there is thrice thy money offered thee. Shylock, you have been offered three times the money. Shylock, an oath, an oath. I have an oath in heaven. Shall I lay perjury upon my soul? No, not for Venice. Shylock says, I have sworn an oath in heaven on the holy Sabbath. Should I commit perjury, break my oath, and risk my soul? No, I won't do it, not even for Venice. Balthazar, why, this bond is forfeit, and lawfully by this the Jew may claim a pound of flesh to be by him cut off. Nearest the merchant's heart, be merciful, take thrice thy money, bid me tear the bond. Portia says, very well, this contract is valid, and legally Shylock may demand a pound of flesh to be cut off by him close to Antonio's heart. But please be merciful, accept the three times payment, and let me tear the contract. Shylock says, when it is paid according to the tenor, it doth appear you are a worthy judge. You know the law, your exposition hath been most sound. I charge you by law, whereof you are a well deserving pillar. Proceed to judgment. By my soul I swear, there is no power in the tongue of man to alter me. I stay here on my bond. Shylock says, no, only when it's paid exactly as agreed. Flesh for debt. You seem like a fair judge. You know the law well. Your explanation is spot on. I demand by the law, which you uphold, to give the verdict. I swear on my soul that no one can talk me out of this. I stand firm on my contract. Antonio says, most heartily I do beseech the court to give the judgment. Antonio says, I sincerely beg the court to give its decision. Balthazar, why, then, thus it is. You must prepare your bosom for his knife. Shylock, O noble judge, O excellent young man. Balthazar, for the intent and purpose of the law hath full relation to the penalty which here appeareth due upon the bond. Portia says, because the purpose of the law is fully tied to the penalty which by the bond is owed. Shylock, it's very true, O wise and upright judge. How much more elder art thou than thy looks? Very true, wise and fair judge, says Shylock. You seem much older than you look. You are so wise. He is buttering up Balthazar. Portia says, Balthazar, to Antonio, therefore lay bare your bosom, so bare your chest. Shylock, ay, his breast. So says the bond. Doth it not, noble judge? Nearest his heart. Those are the very words. Shylock says, yes, his chest. That's what the bond says. Doesn't it, great judge? Nearest his heart. Exactly as written. Balthazar, it is so. That's correct. Are there balance here to weigh the flesh? Are there scales to weigh the flesh? Shylock says, I have them ready. Portia, have by some surgeon Shylock on your charge to stop his wounds, lest he do bleed to death. Balthazar says, have a doctor standing by Shylock at your expense to stop the bleeding so he doesn't die. Shylock, is it so nominated in the bond? Balthazar. It is not so expressed, but what of that? It were good you do so much for charity. It is not written in the bond, but so what? It would be kind of you to do it out of charity. Shylock. I can't find it. It's not in the bond. This passage highlights Shylock's unyielding demand for justice, while Portia begins to carefully lay the groundwork to outsmart him by adhering strictly to the law. The tension grows as Shylock's cruel insistence becomes evident, and Antonio resigns himself to his fate. Meanwhile, Bassanio's loyalty to Antonio reaches its peak, offering everything he holds dear to save him. Portia's aside reveals her wit and awareness of Bassanio's careless words about sacrificing his wife, hinting at the humor amidst the drama. Crescenio. I have a wife whom I swear I love. I wish she were in heaven so she could plead with the angels. Nerissa. It's good you make this offer behind her back. Shylock. These are the Christian husbands. I have a daughter. I wish she would have married any descendant of Barabbas. Let's stop wasting time. Please proceed with the sentence. Look at how Christian husbands speak. I have a daughter. I would rather she married the worst criminal than a Christian. Let's get on with it. Portia. A pound of merchant's flesh is yours. The law allows it, and the court awards it. Shylock. Most rightful judge. Portia. You must cut this flesh from his chest. The law permits it, and the court awards it. Most learned judge. A sentence. Come prepare. Such a wise judge. Let's get started. Portia says, wait a moment. There is something else. This bond gives you no drop of blood. The contract says you can take flesh but not shed blood. It explicitly says a pound of flesh. Only a pound of flesh, no more, no less. Take your pound of flesh, but if you shed even one drop of Christian blood, the law of Venice will confiscate your land and wealth, and you will face severe consequences. Gratiano. Oh, what a fair and learned judge. Mark this, Shylock. Shylock. Is that the law? Wait, is that really the law? Portia. You can check it yourself. Since you demanded justice, be assured. Shylock. Fine, I'll take the offer. Pay me 3 times the bond and let Antonio go. Portia. Soft. The Jew shall have all justice. Not so fast. You rejected the money earlier. He will get only what the contract allows. You are entitled to nothing but the penalty itself. Portia. Prepare to cut the flesh, but shed no blood, nor take more or less than a precise pound, not even the weight of a hair. Gratiano. A second Daniel, a true judge. Now we have got you, Shylock. Shylock. Fine. Just give me the original amount, and I'll leave. Portia. He already refused it in the open court. Gratiano. A Daniel still, a wise judge indeed. Portia. The laws of Venice says this. If an alien seeks to harm a citizen, half your wealth goes to the injured party, the other half goes to the state, and your life depends on the Duke's mercy. This applies to you, Shylock. Now bow and beg mercy from the Duke. Duke says, to show the difference in our nature, I pardon your life. Half your wealth belongs to Antonio, the other half to the state, though humility might reduce the state's claim. Antonio. Let the state waive its fine for half the wealth, but let me keep the other half in trust. On 2 conditions. He must convert to Christianity. He must sign a will leaving his estate to Lorenzo and Jessica, Shylock, take my life instead. You take everything I have when you take my wealth. Shylock, utterly defeated, is forced to agree, and the scene ends with Gratiano mocking him as the tables have completely turned. Portia's wit and skill expose the limits of Shylock's plan and reinforce the theme of mercy versus justice. In this part of the scene, the story reaches its resolution, with Shylock leaving utterly defeated and the Duke extending gratitude to Portia, disguised as Balthazar. Here is a okay. The Duke's final command. Duke says Shylock must fulfill these terms or I will revoke the pardon I just granted him. Portia, what do you say, Shylock? Are you content? Shylock, I am content. Portia, clerk, prepare a deed of gift. Shylock, please allow me to leave. I'm not feeling well. Send me the deed later and I'll sign it. Leave, but make sure you sign it. Duke says. Gratiano, when you are baptized, you will have two godfathers. Gratiano sarcastically refers the Christian baptism ceremony. If I were the judge, you would have 10 godfathers to bring you to the gallows, not the baptismal font. He cruelly jokes that Shylock deserves execution, not conversion. Shylock exits the scene, humiliated and stripped of his dignity. Duke, to Portia, still disguised as Balthazar. Sir, please join me for dinner. He invites the young lawyer to dine with him as a gesture of thanks. Portia, I humbly ask for your pardon. Portia politely declines. I must leave for Padua tonight, and I need to depart immediately. She creates an excuse to leave so she can return to her true identity. Duke, I am sorry your schedule doesn't allow it. Antonio, make sure you show this gentleman your gratitude. This part of the play emphasizes Shylock's total defeat and the magnanimity or condensation depending on the interpretation of the Christians. It also sets the stage for the revealing of Portia's disguise and the resolution of the play's romantic subplots. With this, the chapter ends for first year BA LLB. This is the chapter number 1 that I was reading through. Thank you very much for listening. I hope this chapter helps you. Go through it, revise it, because a substantial portion of the questions would come from these 13-14 chapters that we have in our syllabus. Almost, I think 40 marks is covered by these chapters in different ways, like writing character note or talking about a particular character or a particular story or who said, under what context, and so on. So do go through all of these chapters. You can listen to these videos on 2x or 1.5x the speed, so that you can cover up the entire chapter just before the exams. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye bye, and best of luck for your English exams, law and literature. Take care. Bye bye.